for the press, it tends to become a speech rather than a press conference. So the first 15 minutes or so was basically him just talking and saying how fantastic it's been and how nobody said that the games would go ahead and they went ahead. No one said they'd get a broadcaster and they got a once-in-a-lifetime broadcast deal. No one said they'd sell tickets and all the stadiums are full. Not quite true. But so there was a lot of this stuff going on. And then when the questions started, and I think over a 45 or 50-minute event, they took about 7 or 8 questions. And every time Infantino made a point, he would then turn to one of his FIFA legends to back up his point.
Well, they're being paid to be there. I'm just curious, because can they be?
No, honestly, I was watching it thinking they must be. FIFA insists they aren't paid as an income, but they are there for pretty much the full tournament on FIFA dime, in 5-star hotels, in boxes, etc. But you wouldn't think players of that level and heritage would love a hotel room and some tickets and some hospitality that much that they would go to those lengths. But maybe they do. Or maybe there's also, I think it's possible there's a kind of tiered system of ambassadors because they have so many, they have thousands across the world. So I do wonder whether there's some sort of tiered system that has different incentives based on the levels of engagement.
Well, Phil, let's talk about the football, because it is still a football tournament despite all the noise around it. What have you made of the tournament?
I think Infantino is going to describe it as a huge, huge success no matter what happened. He'd have said that if half the teams hadn't turned up.
Sorry, he actually described it as a huge, huge, huge success. That's the quote.
Oh, no, fair enough. Just to prove my point, yeah. And I genuinely think, there'd be less cynicism about the tournament if FIFA didn't keep trying to tell you that it's the greatest invention in the history of the sport. But I do often feel like Infantino is trying to convince himself rather than many of the people listening. And I would imagine that those really close to him do take on the guise of nodding dogs. And, with them, he's preaching to the converted. But with the rest of us, he must know that there's a certain amount of eye rolling. I mean, there is part of me that does actually really like the concept of clubs from all over the world playing each other when ordinarily they wouldn't. Like Boca Juniors versus Bayern Munich, or, that sort of club playing European side like PSG, Real Madrid is actually a sort of fixture that I'm quite here for. But I just can't be doing with the manufactured hype, which is what we saw an awful lot of in the States, and which I assume we're going to see a lot of leading up to the World Cup in 2026 as well. The final last night, it has to be said that both teams seem to care about it. And I think that's probably because players just aren't programmed to enjoy losing games. And I think with a tournament like this, once you get beyond the question of, are we as a club going to bother with it and take it seriously, it's probably not that difficult to get players to buy into it. I mean, it's a trophy, and in the grand scheme, I suppose you would say it's not a wholly insignificant one. I've never really been sure exactly where it ranks, and I still can't decide. But there is definitely this appeal of being seen to have the full set of medals, full set of trophies, and that's probably why PSG were so niggly last night. One good, solid trademark performance in New Jersey, and they've put together the perfect season, or about as perfect a season as a club in France are ever going to have. But I mean, as far as the players go, don't forget that the bonuses at play here as well. So there is a vested interest for them. I was reading Adam's piece this morning, and it was saying in there that Chelsea put up something close to the kind of bonuses you'd expect, or the payments you'd expect if you were going for the Premier League or the Champions League. And realistically, so Chelsea would, because winning that last night, in total, the tournament's worth what? More than £80 million to them? Something like that. Why wouldn't you go after that money seriously? And I think that's probably where FIFA have had quite a big win with this.
Yeah, you think about the windfall to a certain degree, but also, Adam, let's think about the football. I mean, for Chelsea, considering this is a team that, some might say are still finding out who they are, beating PSG in a final like that, I mean, that's quite epic for their fans alone as well.
It is. And look, I think from Chelsea's point of view, the value of winning it will not just be in the money they get today, but also kind of the branding value of it, to actually be able to go around for the next 4 years and tell sponsors we are the best club in the world, whether people mean that or not. If you're pitching that to a major global company that kind of knows about football but isn't necessarily completely across the nuances between Champions League, Premier League, Club World Cup, Conference League, all this sort of stuff, then that probably sounds pretty impressive to a chief marketing officer. So, sorry, I've gone immediately off what this means football-wise, back on to why it's also good for Chelsea from a football point of view. But I think from Chelsea's football perspective, I think it just feels that sense of, there's been a lot of questions about Chelsea's strategy for the last few years. I don't think this is like everything they've done is correct. There's clearly been some pretty peculiar moves and decisions over the past few years. But I think the consensus now is Chelsea have a collection of really young, talented players with a coach who can clearly motivate them. I think everyone felt João Pedro would be a really good signing, and the early signs are that that's probably going to be the case. But there was also, I thought, the story of Trevor Chalobah, for example, yesterday, a player who had been pushed out and loaned out, and now he's come back and got back in the team. Him and Colwill yesterday was superb. So there's quite a few stories in there of players who looked kind of down and out, who have fought their way back, and then other players like Caicedo and Pedro and Neto that just look like really good signings, that looked like pretty good bets when they signed it and are proving to be that.
I would just say as well that I did really enjoy the football itself last night. And I think part of the reason that I did was because it's quite a long time since you've seen anybody come up with a really good strategy of beating PSG, and especially beating them like that. And tactically, it was pretty engaging. And I wouldn't have said that about a huge number of the games all the way through the tournaments. But I did think if you stripped away what was going on round about, and that was very difficult to do, but if you did, the football itself was pretty compelling because of what went on.
Yeah, we have to talk about Donald Trump, and we have to talk about the halftime ceremony, or just the ceremony of the final anyway. Donald Trump making an appearance halftime, and let's not forget about the trophy ceremony at the end, Phil. I mean, what did you make of all that? I guess we're looking at football body meets politics, that kind of very strange mix. But also, when you think of what Adam's talking about in terms of, Trump Towers now being the headquarters of FIFA, I mean, I don't know how that sits with me personally, but how did that sit with you?
Yeah, there's a lot feeding into this, and the presence of Trump, and it's not just him. Elsewhere in the world, Infantino courts political influence and rubs shoulders with people high up, particularly in the Middle East, in Qatar and Saudi Arabia as well. That is a strand of what FIFA are doing. I think with this game and tournament specifically, they feel like they're chasing the Super Bowl commercial format, if that's fair to say. And I guess that ties into the way in which they've been chasing the American market full stop. First of all, with the Club World Cup, and then with the World Cup itself next year. I have to say, as I sat through the halftime show, I got the sense that I wasn't their target audience, if you catch my drift. A 44-year-old Scottish bloke. Adam's about 15 years younger than me, so he might have had a very different perspective on it. But from my point of view, it was pretty naff, and it was always going to be. And there is part of me that wonders that what an American who, say, is only vaguely into football or isn't into football at all but happened to stumble across it would have made of it. Would they have liked it? Would it have been appealing, or would the reaction have been, what is this? What's this all about? As for the trophy presentation, I'm not the only person who's pretty uncomfortable with Infantino's proximity to Donald Trump and others. And as I say, I'm not just saying that because it is Trump. And it was sort of coming to something over the weekend when you had Sepp Blatter coming out and basically accusing FIFA of selling its soul to Saudi Arabia. I think the geopolitical nature of all this does kind of grate on people. And I don't know, we had Salt Bay at the World Cup in 2022, didn't we, on the pitch. These people are going to be on the scene. They're going to be rounding about what's happening and the football itself. But I think supporters and spectators, they don't like to see these individuals making it all about them or being any more prominent than they should be. It does tend to grind their gears a little. But Infantino clearly wants Donald Trump to be front and centre to some extent, and you'd think that's going to be the case next summer as well. Yeah,
I mean, it's all a matter of taste, isn't it, though, Adam? I mean, this is an American event ahead of the World Cup as well. They can put their spin on it if that's the way you want to look at it. But did Doja Cat do it for you? Did Thames do it for you?
What Phil just said was interesting about the point about kind of the new fan and how this engages the new fan. I mean, I was there yesterday with my partner, his first ever soccer game. So as that case study, that was quite an interesting thing to sort of observe what he thought about it and different things like that. And I think on the halftime show in the stadium, it felt like an event that was made for broadcast because it was on a really raised platform, and the artists were like this speck really in the distance. Whereas normally for a halftime show, you're using the pitch. Now, I presume whether it was because of timings or because of the concerns over the quality of the pitch, which was being watered pretty much